Hi there, I'm Craig Matthews, the CEO of Osprey Approach, and we're delighted to be hosting a joint webinar today with the Law Factory, a team of experienced outsourced legal cashiers that we've had the pleasure of working with for many years now. I'm joined by Alex Simons, the new business development manager at Law Factory, who has a wealth of knowledge in legal accounting and especially around implementing account software and processes in a legal setting. He'll be talking to us about just how essential it is to have your accounts team involved during the procurement process, when you're choosing a new practice management software and making the right fit for your business. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alex.
Thank you, Craig. That's really great of you. It's great to be here. Really lovely to be doing this joint webinar with Osprey. We've got a great relationship. We go back many years, and the software really works for us as well. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about getting your accounts team involved when you think about a software change, because they are integral to the business, and it may be a regretful decision later down the line not to have them involved. And there are many reasons why that is. And we're basically going to talk about that moving forward. So software has changed dramatically. I've been working for Law Factory for 20 years now, and I've seen software change incredibly over those years, from very basic accounting packages that don't do much else, to be honest. Very basic, but they did the job. They kept solicitors compliant and all that kind of thing. But then now we have full case management suites where your entire business can be run through the software that you've chosen. But back 15-20 years ago, it was more that the accounts package was king, because they had to be. They had to stay compliant. You know, there are companies dealing with sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of client money, and we have the SRA accounts rules to think about. Whereas the files themselves, they were handled pretty much on a paper basis, and many firms still do. You know, there are a lot of firms that do still handle things on a paper basis, but back then it was solely that. You didn't tend to have big case management packages where you could have everything on system. So what happened was the cashier made the decision as to what software was going to be used at that time and what we were going to change to. But now what's happened is the more that the emphasis has been placed on the case file, we find that the cashiers are less involved in that choice. Sometimes, and on many occasions, I've seen the cashier has simply been told that the company is moving to a particular piece of software, and the accounts department effectively has to just deal with that. And that is, in my experience, not the best route, because the accounts team is integral to it, and a lot of the business processes surround the accounts team here. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at sort of the reasons and the risks for not getting the accounts team involved and the benefits for getting them involved. So essentially what we're going to look at is, to start off with, is what if I don't get the accounts team involved in my software change? And there are four main areas, and that is that there is a risk to existing processes, there's a risk to whether the accounts team agrees that the system is a good fit for the firm, what impact it has on time, and the time it takes to run the accounts department, and also what tension is caused if the accounts team isn't involved from the outset of changing the software. So I think the first one we're going to look at really is are the processes, really. Generally, the processes can be at risk if you exclude the accounts department. The software that you want to move to, or the firm is looking to move to, it might not work with the current systems and processes that the firm uses. And that's really important, because in 2020, we have this change whereby the system itself is almost governing how the firm works. So all of your processes are based around what goes in and out of this, so that there is very good efficiency. And that's the thing. If the new processes for the new software might be inefficient in comparison to the software that you have at the moment, so you might end up finding that the overall running of the firm is slower and things can't be done as fast as you could before. And that simply may be because an element of the new piece of software just simply takes longer. So it is very important for the accounts department to be involved, because they need to assess whether the processes of getting to the end product with them handling the financial transactions are are as efficient as the old ones. And also the other thing are the policies. The new SRA accounts rules, essentially, we've gone from a huge book to a 7-page document. Those are our SRA accounts rules now, and they emphasize heavily on the firm having their own strict policies as to how to handle things, such as an interest policy, such as policies with regard to transferring funds to office account, such as just handling client money in general. When is it paid in? How quickly is it paid in? All of this sort of thing. So the new system needs to be able to accommodate those policies, or if there has to be a policy change, it's an easy policy change to make. But the crucial thing is, because that is centralizing on the SRA accounts rules, the accounts department needs to be involved to help with the change onto the new system, so that they are confident that that it will fit with the policies that they have. So the other element of change is understanding whether a new piece of software is a good fit. And by good fit, I mean it needs to have either equal to or better functionality than your original piece of software. For example, you may be a legally aided practice, and you may be in a situation where every month your current piece of software allows you to submit your monthly contract online to the SRA, and you can either do it through the software, or you could potentially do it by generating an XML from the software and then uploading it onto the onto the legal aid website. If a new piece of software doesn't do that, and the accounts team hasn't been involved, there's a huge risk there, because the accounts team then is given a piece of software. They say, well, okay, you're going to have to change everything that you do surrounding the legal aid contract for this firm. And maybe you could be in a situation where the accounts team has to do it manually. And that is hugely inefficient in comparison to the way that they did it before. And of course, the problem there is that if it takes them a lot longer, then everything else gets delayed. And then the knock-on effect goes to the fee earners. And the biggest risk is that there could be a knock-on effect to servicing the clients. And that is something that every firm needs to think about, because every firm wants to be putting the client first. So it's very, very important that that's thought about. So yeah, essentially, if there are little considerations for how the work type affects the accounts entries, then this could cause problems. And what I mean by that is that we need to think about the type of work that the company does and how those affect accounts entries. So for example, do we have a situation whereby we're a conveyancing company and our previous software allowed us to automate all of our searching by dealing with sort of search flow and places like that? If our previous software allowed us to do that, does the new software allow us to do that? And if it doesn't, then again, that is going to have a knock-on effect to the accounts, and everything is going to be slower and more inefficient. And it's the accounts department that needs to explain to the directors, all the partners, their needs in order to keep functioning as efficiently as they did before. And this leads us nicely onto the time impact. And everything I said before does have a massive impact on time. And the accounts department, time is everything. And what most legal cashiers do is they look to work efficiently and shave time off every single task. And the key is to look at the system and make sure that the system allows you to work quickly. And the software itself must be at least as fast to use as the previous software. But what we're looking for, really, certainly from an accounts perspective, we're looking for the new software to have features to enable us to process everything faster than our current software. What we don't want is a situation where we're slower, because if we're slower, again, that causes issues. It holds up proceedings, and that's not going to be helpful for anybody. And then the last risk, really, the last main risk, is the staff tension, and it's going to cause ruffled feathers, shall we say, if the accounts team isn't involved in making the decision, or certainly aiding towards the decision. They're not going to feel great, and essentially their entire working practice is going to be shaken up, regardless of what piece of software is chosen. But if they've had a say in it and they haven't had a time to prepare and strategize for using the new piece of software, then it's going to cause some serious headaches across your accounts team. So it's very important to get the accounts department on board at the beginning, just so that, so we don't have this sort of staff tension that we could find if they're not involved. So one of the other elements that we need to think about when we're in the accounts department and when we're looking at changing software, we need to have a think primarily, and this is probably the most important part of any software change, we need to think about how we operate now. How do we work? What do we do? Right down to the basics. And the reason for that is that the basics are what drive everything. So if the basics take too long, everything else is delayed. So we need to really think about that. So let's break it down into 5 little areas that cover sort of some essentials. The first area is the absolute basic, and that's the source information. How do we currently get our source information? Do we get our source information on paper? You know, are we at the original paper slips where a copy goes to accounts and a copy stays on the file and it's put in trays? Have we upgraded from paper to spreadsheets? You know, does the company have a centralized spreadsheet that where all the accounts information goes for the accounts department to pick up and then they process from there? Are we running on emails being sent back and forwards between fee earners, directors, and the accounts department, and with memos attached and things like that? Or have we made the jump and made the upgrade to digital slips, requisitions, and e-chits, things like that, where you actually have the source information on the system? How do we get that information now? How does the accounts department make its decision? Because when you're changing software, these things need to be considered. You know, are requisitions faster than dealing with a paper slip? In my experience, 100% faster. But equally, you need to understand how that requisition works. And as an accounts team, you need to plan it in your head or even on a piece of paper. Just scribble it down and draw out a system where you're moving from an older paper-based system to a requisition system, and see how you can improve your process in that way. And it is really important that's considered. Another big element in every practice is the billing department. You know, essentially the bills dictate how much money we're going to be getting. So how does it handle the bills? Are the bills done by the fee earners, and are they printed and emailed to the accounts department? Are there printed copies just kicking around the office, or are they left in trays? Does the accounts department have to go hunting? Or does the accounts department use something like Microsoft Word to draw up and render a bill manually and then post it afterwards and after it's been sent out? You know, we need to think about those 3 areas, because most systems now, there's a situation where you can generate the bill based on the time recording on the system and automate the entire process. So you end up at the time of rendering the bill, it gets posted, or at the time of authorizing the bill, it gets posted. But either way, it's going to be a lot faster, hopefully, than what we're doing at the moment. So again, the accounts department needs to be involved in the change, because they need to think about how they do it now and what benefits they're going to get from that new system. So the next one is the bank reconciliations, and this is a big area for the accounts department that not a lot of people see. I mean, generally the bank reconciliations are seen by the COFA, and probably, if you have one, the financial director. But most SMEs, it's the COFA that spends the most amount of time next to the cashiers looking at that bank reconciliation, and it takes a lot of time, especially if you're having to do it manually. So, but we need to think about, is the new system faster to use? For starters, going back to my previous point under risks, you know, is the new system faster on a bank reconciliation? Is it the same speed? Is it slower? Is it difficult to use? Is it harder to use? Is it really ugly? You know, is it difficult to navigate? Because anything which is difficult to navigate means it's going to take more time and be less efficient. And can you get copies of the bank reconciliations from the system after you've committed it and saved it for that month? Can you go back and get those copies whenever you need? Because you never know when you might need to refer back to a bank reconciliation that you did 6 months ago. So it's definitely important that those bank reconciliations are clear, fast to use, and you know, you can retrieve them. Month-end reports, and that's another massive area, because at the end of the day, all of the work that we as cashiers put into the system on a daily basis go into producing a set of reports that we can account for, and that we can give to our auditors, we can give to any outside auditors, that we can give to directors, that we can give to COFAs, we can give to all these different people, financial advisors, banks if we need a loan. You know, reports are really, really important, but generally there are only a few people in the firm that think about reports and look at reports until it's absolutely necessary that we have them. So how do we currently operate? Do we hunt around for reports? Do we print them all out and store them in folders somewhere in the back of the office, and then we've got to go hunting for them? do we run the minimal amount of reports and either save them or print them out? I think it's super important to have a think about what reporting processes you currently do, and what reporting processes you like ultimately. Can we export those reports to PDF? Can we email them? Can we save them into a secure folder? Can we save them on system? And that's another thing that the accounts department needs to consider, because it's the accounts department that's going to be generating those. So if you didn't have the accounts department involved in that, that wouldn't be considered, or would rarely be considered, should I say. So it's definitely something to think about. And then just a couple of other considerations really as to general working practices. And I've said, does the accounts department have to run ledgers off for fee earners, copies of ledgers for fee earners? I know several firms, and I've come across recently, where fee earners like a printout, and it's the accounts team that generates that. Can that printout be done remotely? Does the legal cashier have to print it out manually and then take it into the fee earner's office for them to look at? How efficient is that? Could we perhaps think about maybe rendering a ledger remotely and emailing it, or placing it on a secure server or on the system where the fee earner can log in and have a look at it? Do we need to print out the ledgers? Can the fee earner with their login go in and just look at the ledger themselves? So it's definitely worth having to think about that too. And then the last point is how does the accounts department collate reports for the accountants at the year end? Do we need to collate reports for the accountants at the year end? Can we have a system whereby the reports are there already and the accountant can just log in and get them themselves? But how do we do it at the moment? And by moving the system, are we going to be able to do it quicker, easier, faster? Is it going to be the same speed? Is it going to be slower, depending on what system we go for? We need to think about what we do now, and is it going to be better moving on to the next system? So this all surrounds a theme, and that is efficiency and time saving and making things easier. And I'm just going to talk briefly about, will we actually increase efficiency by moving systems? And that's why we did the break it down as to how we operate now, because we needed to know how we operate at the moment to see if we're going to actually get any kind of efficiency increase. So going back to my examples before, one of the first examples was the source information, and we talked about how we operate now. Do we use paper? Do we use spreadsheets? Do we use emails? Perhaps requisitions are a good way forward. Digital slips, essentially, where the cashier gets that instantly and it's on system, and all the details are provided by the fee earner secretary, as they would do normally on a piece of paper, but it's already on system and nothing goes missing, nothing gets lost, there's no handwriting issues. And all the accounts department does is it finds that requisition in their list, checks it to make sure they're happy with it, refers back to the ledger if they need to, and then they either authorize it and act upon it, and then they post it onto the system. And nothing goes missing, essentially, and everything is kept on system, and it is significantly faster. But the accounts team needs to be involved in that decision to move from one to another, because generally with anything like that, there are levels of authorizations that need to go through. Is it a situation whereby the fee earner raises it, director authorizes it, accounts does the final authorization of the posting? Or is it we miss out the middleman and it just becomes the fee earner and the accounts department? But those processes need to be agreed with the legal cashiers at the practice before a commitment is made to a system. So it's very, very important. The next one we spoke about was the billing processes. So as we said, we're using paper bills. Are they done manually on Word and then sent around? How is it done? But I would say that 2020, we've moved way beyond, those the processes that we had 15 years ago. So why not use the system? Get the accounts department to investigate whether on-system automated billing processes are going to increase their efficiency. The time recording is entered onto the system by either the secretary for the fee earner or the fee earner themselves, and then when it is time to render the bill, perhaps the requisition can be done with the request, and then the cashiers render that bill. And when they render the bill, it gets sent off for final authorization, gets posted, gets sent out to the client. And at no point do you have lots and lots of paperwork floating around the office. which could get lost or not sent out or whatever. But every time you print something, it's going to take more and more time. So it is something to investigate. And the accounts department needs to be the ones to look at that and determine whether, by utilising that system, it is going to help increase their efficiency for the billing. The ledger copies was one of the other ones that we spoke about. And yeah, having a system whereby you can access ledgers from anywhere is massively important, certainly at the moment when there are a lot of people now who are working from home. Gone are the days really where you can have ledger printouts, I think. And I think a ledger printout where cashier has to go hunting for a fee earner who's asked for a printout to have a look at it. I think we're now in a position where fee earners and secretaries should be able to have their own login and they can look at ledgers. And if they do have a query with that ledger, then yeah, contact the accounts department, have a chat about it. But again, the accounts department, because it surrounds client ledgers, needs to be involved and actually explain to a fee earner, or sorry, to a director really, when we're making a software change, have a think about it. Say, well, look, do I want a piece of software where I still have to render ledgers? Or would I much rather have a piece of software where we don't have to do that and people can find them themselves? Or at the very least, the cashier can render a ledger to a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet or some other digital file and either save that for someone to find or email it over. And you know, it's important to have that element of efficiency increase surrounding the ledgers. The next topic is report collation with regard to efficiency increases. And again, we spoke about how do we operate now? Do we deal with paper copies which are saved, which are printed out and are put at the back of the office, and every year or every month the firm has to go hunting for those? And generally paper, it takes more time because you've got to print it and then you've got to file it and then you've got to find somewhere to put it. It costs more money because all of the toner that you're using, just simple things, toner that you're using, certainly if you're in a bigger firm and you've got some hefty reports you've got to export every month, the paper as well, obviously the time it takes, the space that it takes, but also is it overly environmentally friendly? Do we want to be, we're a big firm, do we want to be printing out a 50-page matter listing every single month onto paper? I personally think that that's an inefficient use of resources. So I think it's important to research the report collation and how we deal with it. Many pieces of software allow reports to be stored within it. So you can simply run your month end, you have a suite of reports saved within the software and they can be rendered at any time and you can go back into any month or period, go and get them. If an auditor or a COFA needs to look at one of those reports, very simple. Either they log into the system themselves or the cashier goes in, gets them, emails them, saves them somewhere for them to find in a secure area. But do we need to print them? I'm not sure. But what I would say is that, again, accounts team needs to be involved because they're the ones who have to render those reports. And if we're in a situation where a software change means that the report collation is going to be longer, harder, and use paper and take up cost and time and that kind of stuff and money and space, then I think it's really, really important that the cashier determines whether that is the software that they really want to go for. So moving forward onto the next element, I think the key to all of this is that when you do get your cashiers involved, they need to investigate the system fully and they need to have a lot of pre-prepared questions. Again, think about how they operate at the moment, what they do for certain things, how they post and stuff like that. They need to get these questions ready to go. That way, when it comes to demo time, and they can, or online, even online demos as well as face-to-face, they can ask these questions before the final decision is made, so that they're happy that it is going to be the right choice for them. And they need to again go into specifics and go into quite simple elements, right down to how the postings work. And a lot of cashiers will spend a lot of time posting, and that involves typing stuff into the computer, pressing enter, and it shows on Ledger. If we're using requisitions, obviously there's a lot less time spent typing things in and posting things, but the cashier needs to understand how the postings work from start to finish. Is a posting going to take me longer per posting, every posting on this new system, or is it faster on my current system? Do we need to look at alternative systems where the postings are actually faster than the system we're currently looking at? and they need to investigate just how long it's going to take them to do that entry. And also think about how complicated the postings are. Certain systems make the postings themselves quite complicated, and they feel that there are certain things that need to be involved with every single entry. Other packages make it much simpler. So that needs to be a factor, and the only people that can determine whether it is going to be an efficient change with regard to posting speed is the cashier, because they're the ones who do the postings. They also need to have a think about some of the specialist postings. And I say specialist, it depends on a lot to do with your work type. Are we a conveyancing company where we are using a control account for our land registry? In which case, can I make entries that go from my disbursement section to my land registry account? Can I make that entry? And can I move those backwards and forwards? Are we a conveyancing company that deals with our searches in a certain way, and how we record our searches, and the VAT elements of those searches as well? It's another thing to think about too. Are we a legally aided practice where we have a contract and we have a control account for our contract? And do we journal post between our client ledgers and our control account to handle those contract elements? And will the new system allow me to do it? If it does, will it allow me to do it efficiently? Is it more efficient than my current system? Because if it's not, should we be moving? So that is those postings. A lot of time spent doing those entries to keep these accounts up to date and compliant. Very, very important to determine whether you can still do what you currently do, and preferably do it faster. Another element is the bespoke reporting. Can it do bespoke reporting? Do we have, say, a management meeting that happens on the third Thursday of every month, and my senior partner and ex-fee earners, they want specific reports for that meeting, and they want them every single time. Does my system allow me to produce those reports? Do they produce them as standard? Can I bespoke those reports? So can I edit them? Can I put in filters on those reports so that we get what we need? Does it have a report writer that we can use? All that kind of thing is very, very important, because we need the same reports every month. Another element, can I get a system whereby I can set reporting dates where they automatically send those reports on a certain frequency to certain people? Does my system do that? And again, the accounts department has to render these reports and has to make sure that they have those reports for the meeting. So it's the accounts department that needs to ask the question, determine whether that's going to happen or not. So very, very important. How is VAT dealt with? We've all seen the massive changes, the fact that we're now doing Making Tax Digital. How is that dealt with on the system that we're looking at? Is it quick? Is it easy? Do we have to log in every single time? Does it save my login details? Is it simple to use? Is it easy to understand? Does it save my VAT reports? Those, again, accounts department has to render these every single quarter and ensure that the VAT is submitted to the HMRC and is then paid. So it's very important that they have a solid VAT module on that system, which they can rely on and they understand. And the last bit is, are there any extra utilities specific to the firm? Are there any specific things that we need? Do we need our system to be able to integrate with SearchFlow for our searches, for example? Can it do that? Are there any other little utilities, any other things that we might use as a firm where other firms don't, because that's how our processes are put together? So it's very important to get these things written down and investigate fully before committing. Because the last thing you want is to commit to a piece of software and then find out that actually it's not as good as you thought it might be, despite initial impressions. So it really is important to do that investigation, ask the right questions, make sure the accounts team is involved in that. So really, just to sort of round things up and conclude, it is, in my opinion, of the utmost importance that the accounts team is involved in every step of the way. So not just after the initial decision has been made. Don't wait until you're a couple of months down the line and your accounts department, you've practically made up your mind, and the accounts department is then told, oh, we might be moving to this software. Get them involved at the beginning and let them have a conversation with you about how they operate, what their processes are, what the firm's policies are, and just ensure that they have a list of questions to ask and go through with the new software company to ensure that all of the bases are covered. And really, the new piece of software should be more efficient. It should be faster. It should be more secure. And it's certainly much easier to use than your current system. If you are operating at the same speed and efficiency as your current system, I would ask why change. If you're about to be operating slower and less efficient than your current system, again, I would ask why change. But with both of those, I would also say look at alternatives and just ask the questions, investigate fully, and ensure that you're going to be working at peak efficiency with your accounts department on board. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure working with Osprey. I've got Craig Matthews here, who I believe may have some questions for me. Craig, have you got anything to ask about this presentation?
Thanks, Alex. That's really interesting stuff. A couple of questions, if I may. What would you say to an accounts department who might have an "if it isn't broken, don't fix it" mentality? Is that something you face quite often?
Yeah, it's something I find quite a lot. But I suppose the first thing I'd say to that is a case of the system that you're using, the process that you're using might not have been broken 15 years ago, but is it going to be as efficient as it is in 2020? So I would always do systematic reviews of processes and software on a regular basis, and just review what features are available in the software that could actually enhance the existing process that you have. And generally, if you do that and you keep on top of that with the new legal tech, you'll find that everything becomes quicker, and it still isn't broken.
Thanks, Alex. I suppose it's very easy to get set in your ways if you're doing the same process every day, but you're right. Legal tech moves legal tech moves forward so very quickly. It is very important to keep appraised of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question then. Change management. It's certainly one of the big issues we face. I'm sure it's biggest issues faced by many firms when they're upgrading software. In your experience, are there any quick wins that can help that process from the accounts department's perspective?
I'd say there's one big quick win, and that is to get the accounts department and anyone else you feel has got quite an important role at the practice involved with the decision at the beginning. Don't wait until you're 2/3 of the way through the process, and as a partner of Fiona, your mind is almost made up already. I would say get people involved at the beginning and ask for their opinion, because whatever you change is going to affect the way they work. So getting those people involved at the beginning makes them feel really valued, and it makes the whole change a lot easier.
Great advice. Thanks ever so much, Alex. With the change of working environment for many people lately and a move to a more flexible working practice, what impact do you see that having on the accounts team in the future? What risks are going to be? What opportunities are going to be? And how can we make the most of this?
I've made the most of it. Kind of go back to your first question a little bit with regard to if it isn't broken, don't fix it, in as much as have a look at your system that you're using, and have a look at the system that you might be changing to, and just see if it can support remote working. I think recent events have meant that more people obviously have been working from home, and more companies have realized that they can do it. But it's just a case of thinking about, whether or not a manual process is used on paper, and whether or not we actually change that to using the system to do that. Internet connections generally are excellent at the moment, so you should be able to do most things remotely. I'd say the risk, rather than the risk being to do with the actual system and the processes itself on the system, I'd say the risk is a firm losing regular contact with the people who are working from home and who are working remotely. So my advice to get around that, and what we do at the Law Factory, is every single day we have a Teams meeting and we talk to each other. And I'd say eliminate that risk of feeling isolated within a company by talking. But the opportunities are great. The opportunities mean that you can have your central hub, you could even base your central hub around your system with the processes that you implement, and it means that you can recruit from anywhere. You can recruit from someone who's 100 miles away from you, but as long as you communicate regularly and people are trained well enough on the system and how you operate, I think there's huge amount of opportunity in that.
Thanks very much, Alex. At Osprey, we moved to the cloud back in 2004, so it's something that we've sort of seen, and our customers have been well prepared for it. You almost think that the concept of fit for purpose may get rediscussed and redefined. Is my software fit for purpose? Question one now is, can I access it remotely? Are my business processes fit for purpose? Question one, can I access them remotely? Do I need to be in the office to do it? And if you do, then, like you said, it's probably time to redefine those business processes to enable you to operate in this new environment we find ourselves in today.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks for your time today. Hope everyone found that really useful. Any queries or questions, then please do feel free to reach out to myself or indeed Alex on the details at the end of this webinar. Thanks ever so much.